Hi, everyone. First, thank you for being a part of this panel discussion. We have a fantastic, accomplished panel here today. I will just move straight into introductions. I'm Shailee Adinolfi. I work on government and social impact solutions with ConsenSys, based out of DC. And I will allow the panelists to introduce themselves. So, starting with Tal.
Great, thank you. Tal Viskin. I am part of Accenture Development Partnerships, which is our corporate social enterprise within the larger mothership Accenture, which is a global management consulting firm. My job is very interesting because I have one foot in the commercial for-profit sector and another in the international development sector. We serve primarily our INGO clients, but we also work with donors, foundations, and even governments. So it's really the convergence of business and the development sector and thinking about how we define socially good use cases, which obviously we're talking a lot about today.
Do it all here.
Hello, my name is Blick. I work at a company called Diginex. We're a Hong Kong headquartered global blockchain solutions company. We have 7 offices worldwide. The company is broadly broken down into financial services and global blockchain solutions. I head up the government team. Government is very broadly defined as anything touching government's regulation. So I spend a lot of my time working and identifying where policy frameworks intersect with changes in private sector behavior and how we can help technology achieve that. If we had the hypothesis that one of the benefits of blockchain is transparency and one of the drivers of transparency is regulation, how we can help the private sector with new disclosure requirements they have around sustainability, around modern slavery. On modern slavery, we partnered a year ago with an NGO called the Mekong Club. They're a single issue NGO looking at combating modern slavery in private sector supply chains. We worked with them exceptionally closely over the past year. I think they're in our offices every single day. I'm in their office 3 days a week. And we spent a year building a solution together with them and the 33 members of their business association. So they have 4 working groups: retail, footwear and apparel, hospitality, which is casinos and hotels, and the financial services. If you look at their website, you'll see the types of companies who are involved. And we spent a year launching or building a solution, which we got totally wrong to begin with, spent 12 months iterating it, launched it in February, and scaling it and expanding it later this year. So we can come into more details later on as to what that looks like.
Hello, I'm Houman Haddad, Head of Emerging Technologies at the United Nations World Food Programme. I'm also the founder of Building Blocks Projects, which is the largest implementation of blockchain technology for humanitarian aid in the world, serving currently 106,000 Syrian refugees in Jordan. And the aim of the project is generally to see how we can improve humanitarian work through better coordination between the various providers and also finding ways to directly empower the people we serve. I have a talk about what we do at 4 p.m. under track 2 later today. Anyone who's interested is more than welcome to join.
Rick? Hi, everybody. My name is Rick Shreves. I'm with Mercy Corps. Mercy Corps is one of the world's largest humanitarian aid and development agencies. We have about 5,000 people in our team spread over 43 countries around the world. At Mercy Corps, I serve as the Director of Emerging Technologies, and my job there is to identify new and emerging technologies that have potential application for our field teams, and then to spin up trials of those technologies. I also serve as the consultant, if you will, internally at Mercy Corps for anything that's DLT or crypto related.
So, where are you all seeing the most traction in the humanitarian space for blockchain? What are the use cases that you keep hearing about and that you think that there could be some real impact with application of blockchain? I guess, Rick, do you want to start with that?
That's me. I'll jump in. It hasn't unfolded like I expected it to unfold. We initially looked for what would be a soft point of entry that was something that everyone on our team could get their head around, because I don't have implementation staff on my team, so every time I want to roll something out, I need to find a field team that has the capacity to take it on and has the willingness to take it on and can fold it into an existing program. We thought that soft point of entry was going to be product traceability for our agricultural teams. I mean, after all, that's an easy sell. Everyone can understand food safety, right? And we've been going down that path for a while. We are starting finally, after a couple of years of effort, to see some progress in that area, and I do think that is going to wind up eventually being a good area for us. But what has surpassed it in terms of excitement at the agency and in terms of field trial is the financial inclusion aspects related to digital currencies. And this is something that we now have a couple of trials running on in a couple of different formats. Everything from direct to beneficiary transfers of cryptocurrency to using bespoke ERC20 tokens as electronic vouchers. So that's really where we're starting to see some traction at the agency. Supply chain, et cetera, that's all quite interesting. Those are going to be longer lifts for us, and they aren't things that we have funding for right now because, let's face it, in the NGO world, right, we have a business model where we're constantly strapped for cash and resources, and so large investments that require CapEx and take years to execute are oftentimes quite a ways down on the to-do list for us.
If I may go next, I'll just build on a few things that he said. The humanitarian community is increasingly moving towards, and I think somebody said this earlier today, towards enabling people to make their own purchases and decisions as opposed to giving things in kind. Like for us, for years, we gave food in kind, corn, rice, wheat, we bought it, and we handed out. And now we enable people to buy their own stuff, which can take the form of electronic vouchers, mobile money, prepaid cash cards. And the argument there is that, one, it has an element of dignity. So instead of telling people what to do, they make their own decision. Two, it can have a stimulator effect in the local economy. So instead of us bringing grain from the other side of the world and dumping it, if the right conditions exist, people can avail of that. It's not a silver bullet, doesn't always work. You need to ensure equitable distribution of that assistance. Usually the head of household is a male, and unfortunately some places he might take the entitlements and not equally distributed, whereas when it comes to food, if the entitlement is restricted to food, usually the female is in charge of that, and that's the element of empowerment, and for sure, or most of the time at least, ensures equitable distribution. But long story short, that more and more people are shifting towards cash. And when this happens, data coordination becomes much more important to make sure you don't over-target a certain group and under-target the rest, and so on and so forth. But currently, it's extremely fragmented and siloed. Everyone is using their own systems, their own distribution channels, and none of the systems meaningfully talk together. So for me, one of the areas where there seems to be building up some appetite for it is this using blockchain as a data coordination mechanism, having a unified identifier for each group or person being served, channeling all entitlements there, to be able to then see what's going on and be able to optimize and harmonize on a global scale. And using the same architecture, essentially the next step could be digital ID, which is also very exciting. But just like cash, ID information, especially in the humanitarian context, is quite fragmented. Everyone has a partial view of the puzzle. Somebody might know the nutritional profile, somebody might know the health profile, education profile, and getting everyone to agree and work towards this unified ID is a challenging part, which for me is a reason why the financial transfers are a little bit less sensitive. And once people understand what it means, how data protection privacy works, then you can take the next step. And that's exactly what we're doing with our building blocks projects. Currently, it's for cash. We're about to launch a pilot with UN Women, hopefully in 2 weeks' time, to demonstrate exactly how this multi-agency concept could work, and then hope that we can move forward from there.
I'm pleased you mentioned data storage. I think that's where we see the most ground being made in the short term. I think we look at it in terms of what I believe I know to be true. So this is factual information that I'm told during an onboarding process, a screening process, a once-a-year audit process. I'm told a factory has 1,000 workers and they pay each one of those workers $500 an hour. What we really focus on then is the transactional and behavioral information that should underpin that factual information. So if I'm told a factory has 1,000 workers and they pay each one of the factory pays each one of those workers $500 a month, I need to be able to see salary verification. I need to be able to see employment contracts which reconcile against the factual information. If the factual information and the transactional information don't match, then one of two things have happened. Either the facts have changed, which may be the case, or something is happening that shouldn't be happening. So we focus a lot on the collection of quantitative data and where we can improve the audit process. And we know from the social audit process that turning up once a year with a clipboard, 300 questions, and announcing you're going to turn up is not a good way to conduct a social audit process and does not get good information. We're working with a company at the moment who is auditing a company, another company who all sorts of social governance metrics about how they behaved, had lots of factories in Southeast Asia. But it turned out they only turned the air conditioning on the 2 days of the year that the auditors came around because there was a big electricity saving to not turn the air conditionings on every other day of the year. So where can you work with partners to identify what are the 10 to 12 social governance mechanisms that I should be seeing? And it's not perfect, it's not real time, but more continuously so. And then begin reconciling that against the factual information. Speaking to another gentleman the other day who was in charge of a $3 billion procurement budget, so sizable. And at the moment, their social audit checking is Google search on everybody, the 26,000 suppliers that they purchase from. So it's that ongoing collection of data and transactional behavior that you can start reconciling against factual information. And I see that as data storage, data sharing, data transparency is where we see the most immediate gains.
I'll be very brief. I agree with the first couple kind of thematic concepts around financial inclusion and supply chain agricultural provenance. And I'll unpack the supply chain one just for a minute because we're seeing a lot of traction in the market right now in this space, really being able to view the full supply chain from the moment the coffee bean is harvested by the farmer all the way to the point where us as consumers at the end of the supply chain are able to purchase that in a store or a product in a restaurant. And having that full end-to-end visibility and transparency and what blockchain enables in that space is very powerful. To Rick's point, I think there's a reason that use case resonates with people. It's one that we all understand as consumers. We all eat food. We all care what we're putting into our bodies and what we're giving to our kids. And companies also care about it, and the consumers are putting pressure on these corporations, these companies, to actually change and incentivize the right behavior. So I see the supply chain agricultural provenance sort of story as a springboard, if you will, into other use cases, whether that's sustainability, whether that's looking at kind of encouraging sustainable farming practices, and extending into other topics like financial inclusion and others. So I think a really powerful use case.
Thank you. So I know in humanitarian work, this is going to be a question for Rick and Houman. You work with a range of different partners to support the technology implementation. And so there are some challenges and opportunities to work with partners there. What are you looking for when you look to partners to work, either non-blockchain or blockchain? What are you looking for?
Well, doing what I do, which is emerging technology, working through partners is absolutely essential for me to have success. Because, I work with virtual reality, I work with drones, I work with satellite imagery, I work with 3D printing, I work with blockchain, I work with biometrics. There's no way I can have expertise in all those areas. The only way that I can function is by partnering with experts in those fields. So we lean heavily on those sort of skills. What are we looking for? Well, obviously, it's a willingness to engage with an NGO and do social good work. That isn't too hard to find. What is difficult to find sometimes is an alignment of incentives, right? And an alignment between what they want out of it and what we need out of it. We've been fortunate that we have had over time some really excellent partners who have supported us extensively. And I'm going to shout out Cisco here as one, $10 million over 5 years from Cisco. I'm going to shout out ADP. Tal, I work with quite a bit, and Mercy Corps has an MOU with ADP working on a agricultural provenance system right now. And having access to the expertise within those organizations is absolutely key for us because we really can't afford to go out and acquire that kind of talent. It's working through these firms that lets us leverage those skills and reach more people and deliver more impact. It is oftentimes a long dance to secure that kind of a relationship, and we spend a large amount of time engaging with our partners. It is something that is really requires quite a bit of resources from the NGO side. We have a really good team for that, thank heavens. But, what am I looking for in a nutshell? I'm looking for a willingness to take part in these things that we do, and I'm looking for excitement around what we do. And I'm looking for, obviously, skills, right? I need experts. That's what I'm after. I don't need your money as much as I need your resources.
Yep, everything he said. And yeah. And for me, I think, and we've been really lucky, I have to say, I have to also shout out to Parity Technologies and Baltic Data Science, who have worked extensively with us to build our system, and as well as Iris Guard for biometrics in Jordan. And I think all of them have gone beyond the business relationship, and they really see the potential of what we want to do. And they've gone beyond, really. It's not just about having a purchase order, having them fulfill it. They've, any time of day or night, they've always been available. But I think flexibility is also one thing I would add, because in our world, like, WFP is not just one organization. It's 80 countries, many, many projects. Each one different. Conditions change all the time. Donor, requirements change all the time. Geopolitical situations change all the time. So they need to be aware of this more than perhaps like a first world private sector sort of a kind of work, that anything can change at any time, and just to have the mental resilience to be able to accept that, start over as many times as required until you get what you need.
Thank you. Mark, so how does Diginex think about these applications in the humanitarian sector, and where do use cases or practical applications in these efforts lie and fit within your business model?
So we have a lot of companies or NGOs who approach us. They've read something in the newspaper and they want to block something. We turn down probably 7 or 8 out of 10 projects that we see coming in through the door. We run them through 5 lenses, or at least the work that I do, we run them through 5 lenses. First of all, most critical is, should blockchain be used in this case? So we look for, is there an issue of trust, transparency, and security? And do I need to solve for the question of, I need to know what I'm looking at is what you're looking at? If that is not an issue, then Google Docs is absolutely fine. The second lens is we look for partners. I mean, the reciprocation of yours. I'm going to give another shout out to the Mekong Club. Everyone go to mekonggclub.org. It's a wonderful organization, and I can't speak highly enough of them and how much I have learned and been inspired by them. We work very, very closely together. The third of all is we look for what is the organizational infrastructure through which we can roll out a technological solution. So we know what we can do, which is build stuff. But unless we have partners on the ground who can help implement that and get it to scale, then it's helping 5 people, not 500,000 people. So we look for that as a question. The fourth thing we look at is, what is the impetus to change? There are many bad things happening and many causes to work on, but what forces behavioral change? So looking in the context of modern slavery, you have the UK Modern Slavery Act, copied in Western Europe and North America and Australia. You have many class action lawsuits out against companies. Just 2 weeks ago, a whole bunch of European and Western brands were caught using slave labor in China. And of course, consumer awareness and how that changes purchasing behavior. So there is a large momentum for causing companies to behave in a different way. Not quite as quickly as they should, but they're aware of the issue. And then fifth of all, we look at what is the potential for scale? So it links slightly to the third. Helping 500 people is great, but where are projects? And I think somebody mentioned the numbers earlier on around modern slavery, 40.3 people involved in modern slavery. 9 million people enter modern slavery every year. That's 20,000 a day. That's 1,000 an hour. That's 1 new slave every 4 seconds. There are more people. There are more people today impacted by modern slavery than there are Canadians. I like using that anecdote. And if you go to slaveryfootprint.org, you put in demographics like male, female, where you live, how many children you have, so on and so forth. And it will calculate approximately how many people were involved in slavery and the products that you wear, the clothes that you use, cosmetics that you use, and food that you eat. So that potential for having a significant change, and it's overused a little bit, but we do look at working on purpose-driven blockchain projects at scale. So we want to have an impact that's important. That being said, I think that what we take all of those lenses together, the next important category of filters is the real value add is moving away from a paper-based process. The fact that I use an orchestrated workflow that has a bunch of market participants that happens to use DLT, well, that gives me better cryptography. It gives me some interesting workflow options. It gives me some deterministic computation, but ultimately it's a design choice, and there are other design choices out there. So we would never start from should I use blockchain? We start from where is there a wildly inefficient process which typically uses paper, that has a high error rate, that's potentially and often open to fraud, that I can digitize part of, and then latterly, when I'm 6 or 9 months down that process, where can I start putting that information onto some form of a blockchain? It's definitely process first, blockchain second, not the other way around. So that's how we look at projects.
Thank you. So we've heard about some of the challenges in the humanitarian sector in applying technology. I mean, even in the U.S., we're still getting over that barrier of what is blockchain, right? And I work with the U.S. government, and there's still an education barrier there. So, but there are other challenges in the humanitarian sector on the ground that you have to apply when you're looking at solutions. So, what are some of those specific considerations that you have when considering a solution? And this is a question for all of you. And what are some of the barriers to adoption specifically in this sector?
I can lead off with that. I think there's probably 4 or 5 things that come to mind that are unique and specific to the humanitarian context and sector that we're discussing. I'll try to sort of order them in the order where I think that they're most distinct for the humanitarian sector, and then as I go down the list, maybe a little bit more similar to what we see in the commercial private sector. The first I would say is probably there is still very much a significant gap in low-cost, intuitive solutions at the base of the pyramid. So solutions that actually work for the farmer, for the producer, and that are affordable, and that there's a financially sustainable model for the producer, the farmer, et cetera, the user, if you will. And the design side of that is also important, making sure that those solutions actually work. We know that in many countries where we're dealing with challenges around literacy, for example, you can't design mobile applications or platforms that are text heavy. You need pictures, you need visuals, sometimes you need voice commands, basic feature phones, SMS. You need things that are going to resonate with the local community. So that combination of designing with kind of human centricity in mind and making it affordable and viable for communities is really important. So that's number one. And I think it speaks to Rick's point around the constraints of working in these very challenging environments. The second one, just to build on Mark's point, I think data transparency in how we collect and how we share data in this sector is critical, and I think it is a bit distinct from sometimes how we talk about it in the commercial context. What I mean by that is that I think in this sector there's almost sort of a mandate or an obligation, an ethos to drive towards transparency and to share more openly. There's certainly an expectation on the kind of donor, multilateral, humanitarian side that this sector needs to be kind of operating at a high standard. And that, I think, is a juxtaposition sometimes to the sort of sometimes knee-jerk reaction to kind of guard information, conceal information a little bit for the edge. That's quite different, I think, in the humanitarian sector, and is an important point. There's a couple other points. They're probably fairly similar to how we think about it in commercial constructs. Connectivity challenges and just basic access. We do very much need to think about the digital maturity and access points for these users. Do they have connectivity? Are they online? Do they have access to a smartphone? That informs how you design these solutions and applications, and that's really important. Maybe one or two, and then I'll hand it off to my fellow panelist. I think the other thing that comes to mind is I'm trying to think how to phrase it. Well, maybe I'll pause there. I'll come back to a couple other points.
I think the challenges, and I covered them slightly in those lenses I went through. We look at where can we drive adoption, and then adoption drives impact. As a project, we've been invited to go and look at the cobalt mining in Congo, mica mining in India, to offshore vessels in Thailand, and these are all areas which need a tremendous amount of effort and resources driven against them. But we know with the skill sets that we have, and the partners that we've built in a pre-competitive collaboration, our ability to have impact there is very difficult. We have purposefully chosen to work in areas where we know we can drive impact in, let's say, 18-month to 24-month period, and that process started this year. So we look for, if not a perfect process, where is there some form of process which is already in place that we can build a virtual level on top of it. I'm naturally quite conservative by nature, so I tend to believe the future is a continuation of the past. So rather than going in and saying that something is going to be done completely differently, the partners that we've worked with so far throughout Southeast Asia has been a continuation of the processes that they've already been working on, and us building a virtual level on top of that, which over time will migrate the entire process into something totally different. But we do look for where is there some form of framework that we can work alongside and build a virtual level on top.
He has no challenges or problems. They're just too big to go into right now. I mean, I'll break this down into two areas, and I'll keep this short. Area number one is within the agency or within the sector itself, there's still a need to do a lot of evangelism and education. This awareness of what is the technology, what is it suitable for, when is it suitable to deploy it, what are the limitations. That information is still not widespread throughout the sector, and that's job number one. In terms of a more micro point of view about, where are the challenges that we face, the issues that we face at the implementation stage, Tal really hit it. I mean, the last mile piece is still missing, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. A lot of the most difficult places where we work, we're not going to see these solutions for a while. That's just the way it is because of the inherent difficulties in those situations. Usability is still a monster problem for anything that's facing program participants, and I'm sure you all know this. I mean, there's no such thing as a terribly easy-to-use digital wallet or digital ID management system out there. Not yet. There are things that are in process. There are things that are making great strides, but it's just not there yet. And then the last issue is the one that you've heard me echo already, which is access to resources, talent, expertise. It's really hard right now when the fintech space is sucking all the air out of the room. Everyone has gone to fintech or they're being entrepreneurs. They're not really interested in coming to work for an NGO with the kind of money that NGO pays. So that's our life.
One more that came to mind that I was blanking on earlier, one or two. Yeah, I think the incentives piece, which I've heard in a couple other panel sessions, is really important too. Aligning incentives and getting buy-in and building that sustainability with partners is really challenging. So you have to be really keen to do that well and do it out of the gate. If not, it sort of fails out of the gate. The other one that we didn't really touch on, but is obviously a consideration for any blockchain solution and pilot, is security and data privacy. In a lot of conflict areas, we know that particularly where there's a lack of trust in authority, that individuals may be very reluctant to share their information. And so when you're trying to tease that information and get it on a blockchain or get pieces of it on a blockchain, it can be very challenging. So gaining trust, evangelizing, education, awareness building is all really critical.
If I might just add one point that touches on what you said and another one. So I think in terms of incentivizing, to me, if we can somehow get the private sector involved so that the solutions are not developed by the UN or World Food Program, but they are developed independently so they can be self-sustaining, it's a stronger argument. At the same time, it's really challenging to do that. I mean, we work in some of the most difficult locations in the world with some of the most vulnerable people in the world. So if the money is not going to come from donations and aid, it's hard to see how that business model could be created. And I think if we can somehow crack that, it will become a much stronger and better sustaining model. And another one is the concept of, to some extent, the difference between the first world and our world. So if you have a cryptocurrency wallet and your private key with your Bitcoins in it, there's usually a really good incentive for you to keep that private key private. But in our world, for example, if the entitlements you receive are restricted to food because our donor has said that this money should only be spent on food, and you really need cash, maybe your child is sick or you need to do something else, there's a chance that you might say to your neighbor, well, here is access to this account on which you get $100 of food indefinitely. I need 500 cash right now, and that happens. So I think, to some extent, this can be prevented with biometrics, but biometrics has its own set of questions and issues. So these are also two of the challenges I would add to what the colleagues have already mentioned.
Great, thank you. And with that, we are at time. Thank you for your participation.
Wow.
And